The movie begins by showing a former professional racer named Kazunori Yamauchi. After retiring from his career, Kazunori created a car racing simulation game which he named Gran Turismo. Kazunori deliberately created this game with the highest level of accuracy so that players can experience driving simulations like professional racers. Not only that, players are also free to modify the car they will use, starting from the engine, tires, and other things. The scene then switches to showing a young man named Jan Martinborough, a teenager who really loves the game Gran Turismo. After saving his money for a long time, Jan finally managed to buy a steering wheel-shaped console, so he could be more satisfied when playing Gran Turismo. His father actually opposed his hobby, because Jan's father was a former football player and he wanted Jan to follow in his footsteps, just like his younger brother, Kobe. But Jan insisted on rejecting his father's wishes, because car racing was his passion. Before starting to play, Jan modified his car first. His skills were like a professional racer, who was already fluent in every detail of the game. So it was no surprise that Jan often won in the game against other players from various countries. Scene moves again to show a market executive named Denny Moore who works for a car company called Nissan. That day, Denny presented his idea in front of Nissan officials about the influence of Gran Turismo to increase their car sales, which at that time were falling. He plans to produce a professional car racer drawn from the best players in Gran Turismo, so that game players who usually only play car racing simulations in their rooms will be able to experience a different atmosphere in realistic car racing. And if the idea is successful, then people will automatically start looking at their car company, namely Nissan. Nissan officials initially felt doubtful about the idea, but they finally gave Denny their confidence and asked him to recruit a professional racer who would later train the Gran Turismo players. As a result, GT Academy was formed, a professional car racer training that is ready to recruit skilled players from Gran Turismo. That evening, Denny tried to contact professional racers one by one to help make GT Academy a success. Unfortunately, everyone Denny contacted rejected the idea because they thought combining gaming with the world of professional racing was impossible. Until finally, Danny met a former racer named Jack Shelter. Jack currently works as a mechanic in a car racing team called Kappa. Just like other racers, Jack also doubted Denny's idea. However, this idea was very risky, because game players would of course have difficulty adapting to the real world of car racing. That evening Jack had dinner with the Kappa team to discuss the next match. As an experienced racer, Jack had given some suggestions to a racer named Nicholas, but Nicholas arrogantly told Jack that a mechanic didn't seem to have the right to give input to a professional racer like him. Hearing that, Jack was of course very angry. He immediately left the Kappa team and called Denny to join the Project GT Academy. A few days later, GT Academy immediately selected several Gran Turismo players with the reputation for winning the most. And one of the selected players turned out to be Jan. Before being gathered together, these players are asked to compete first, and later some of the best names will be invited to GT Academy. The night before the race, Jan was invited by Kobe to party and they went in their father's car. While the others were drunk, Jan chose to focus on game practice while chatting with a girl named Audrey who he had loved for a long time. Not long after, the party was broken up by the arrival of a police car. Because Jan was the only one who wasn't drunk, so he was forced to drive the car so they could leave the place. The police car chased their car. But armed with experience in Gran Turismo, Jan and the others managed to escape the police chase. The next day, his father took him to work. His father said Jan would end up being a worker like this if he didn't start practicing football. Jan still doesn't want to listen to his father and rushes off to the Gran Turismo race. Long story short, the Gran Turismo race finally started. As usual, with his ability, Jan managed to get first place in the competition and joined GT Academy. Jan finally arrived at the GT Academy camp with the 10 best players from all over the world. There Jack and Denny train the players so they can become professional racers. Of course, before the training process begins, the players are free to choose whether to continue the training process or not. Because as we know, the world of real car racing will be very different from the one in the game, where in the process they could get injured or even die. After all the players agreed, the training process finally started on the first day, and immediately felt the sensation of racing directly with assistance from Jack. Jan, who rarely drives a car, felt very nervous about undergoing the training. Especially this time he had to drive a racing car. As a result, some players make a lot of mistakes. After practicing driving, the players underwent further training sessions, ranging from resisting heat reflexes, quite heavy exercise to interview practice in front of the camera. In each training process, players who are deemed to have failed will be immediately eliminated until the 5 best players remain. In one of the training sessions, Jan dueled against one of the best players named Maddie. Now Jan's position is quite threatened because his name is at the bottom, which means that if Jan fails this training, he will be eliminated. In the racing session, Jan actually lost against Maddie, but he claimed that his car brakes were slippery. Jack, who was in the car with Jan, said that it was just an excuse he made up because he was actually too panicked and afraid when he was going to overtake. Unexpectedly, Jan's words were confirmed by analysts because the brakes on the car he was driving had failed and were also slippery. As a result, Jan was saved and selected as a candidate for the 5 best players. And now we have arrived at the end of GT Academy practice, and for the final test the 5 best players will race cars without a companion. Whoever comes out as champion will be included in professional car racing, who will represent Nissan. With all the experience and training he has gained, Jan proves his ability in the race. This time, he was originally in last place, but now he is in second place. There was great tension between Jan and Maddie, with a very narrow gap until finally at the final line, everyone was confused about who was in first place. After checking the footage, Jan narrowly won the race and managed to beat Maddie. However, Denny emphasized that they had to choose Maddie as Nissan's representative because he was considered to have much better commercial viability than Jan. However, Jack did not agree with Denny and he appointed Jan as the car racer who would represent Nissan. This victory of course made Jan very happy. He immediately called his mother and couldn't wait to tell his father, because he would prove that he could make his dream come true as a professional racer, even though it all just started from a game. As winner, Jan represented Nissan at its first professional car race to be held in Austria. On the way, Jack told Jan that there would be 6 car racing races, and in one of the races, Jan had to finish at least 4th to be able to get a driver's license, so that he could later be contracted by Nissan. Long story short, Jan's first car race finally arrived. In that race, Jan met Nicholas, a racer who had previously looked down on Jack. Who would have thought that Jan, as a beginner, was quite good compared to the other racers and managed to rank 4th. On the last lap, Nicholas, who was behind Jan, couldn't accept being beaten by a beginner, so he deliberately hit the back of Jan's car, causing Jan's car to spin and occupy the last position. Jack tried to cheer Jan up and said that he was good enough in the first race. There were still 5 other races he had to compete in, so now he couldn't give up. One by one the races continued, but until the last 2 matches, Jan still couldn't get 4th place until finally, we arrived at the final race, which was held in Dubai. This race is the last chance for Jan. If he doesn't finish at least 4th, then he won't get a driver's license to be contracted by Nissan. The race finally started. Because this was his last chance, Jan looked more serious than in previous competitions. Again and again, in the race Jan had to face Nicholas, who kept cornering him. Luckily this time Jan managed to escape Nicholas's attacks, and as a result Nicholas had an accident and couldn't continue the race. Thanks to his efforts so far, Jan finally managed to finish in 4th place and get his license as a professional racer. After his success, Jan thanked Jack for training him. As a professional racer, Jan then traveled to Tokyo with Denny and Jack to sign his contract with Nissan. After signing the contract, Jan got a bonus and used it to fly Audrey to Tokyo. And during that time they became closer and started a more serious relationship. A month after signing the contract, Jan returned to take part in a car racing competition, held in Germany. In this race, Jan looks much more prepared because now he has officially become a professional racer. Jan started the race very well and maintained a fairly high position, but he didn't realize there was an incline on the track until he had a serious accident. Jan's parents, who watched the competition on television, were very worried about Jan's condition. Jan was immediately flown to a medical center and was told while at the hospital that a spectator had died as a result of the accident. This made Jan very afraid and ultimately traumatized and reluctant to return to racing. Jan also blamed himself for the death of the audience. Jack took Jan back to the competition location. There, Jack said that he had retired from racing because he was involved in a fatal accident which caused a fellow racer to die. And Jack asked Jan not to give up like him because Jan's future as a racer had just begun. The investigation also stated that Jan was not at fault for the accident, but this had an impact on Jan's license being threatened. And there were many sponsors canceled their cooperation with Nissan. And then Jack registered Jan to take part in a competition in France. And in this competition, Jan had to get at least third place to prove his worthiness as a professional racer. Besides Jan, Denny also recruited Maddie and Antonio, who were previously GT Academy participants, to form a team together in the upcoming race. And the race day finally arrived. On the day of the race, Jan's family and friends came to watch live. Before the competition started, Jan's father apologized to Jan because he had never supported his interests. Once the race finally started, Jan felt shaken after seeing another racer's car crash and eventually catch fire. Jack then tried to calm Jan down and make him realize that because this race lasts 24 hours, Jan, Maddie and Antonio divide the tasks by taking turns every 3 hours. Jan, Maddie and Antonio completed their tasks without the slightest problem. Then after 9 hours of competition, it was Jan's turn. And unfortunately, it was night with unfavorable weather. This was of course quite difficult for Jan, but fortunately he managed to get through it well. 19 hours have passed, until now Nissan has managed to secure 4th position. But suddenly, Antonio experienced cramps, so Jan had to finish the remaining time alone. Suddenly, the car's wheel nuts came loose in the pit area, so that Jan's position started to be left behind by several other cars. Even so, Jan didn't just give up. He showed his abilities again and managed to regain his position, and he even managed to break the lap record in the competition. On the final lap, Jan again dueled with Nicholas. Who would have thought that Jan's every effort and struggle finally paid off when he succeeded in winning slightly compared to Nicholas? This victory is proof to everyone that game players can also become professional racers if they put in effort and hard work. Everyone, especially Jack and Danny, are very happy with Jan's success, which of course was accompanied by help from Maddie and Antonio, as well as full support from Nissan. And finally, the Nissan team got 3rd place on the podium. In the epilogue, Jan's true face is shown, where currently Jan has competed in more than 200 races. And apparently he also acts as a stunt double in this film.